So I'll call the order at 7 o'clock, and I will call the roll. Ginny.
Present.
Lakey.
Here.
Alan.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
And I am here. So everybody is present. Do we have any resident speak out?
I don't
Okay, we
believe
have-
that was on the agenda. It was more, if you have any comments, send it in. There wasn't anything on the agenda for residents speak out.
Okay.
I don't know if there has to be or should be, but there wasn't.
Okay.
So it's a good question. I don't know if Wes is here. He could maybe tell us whether it should have been on the agenda or not.
Well, I'm just going through the agenda, so I don't think there's any resident speak out. Approval by the minutes from May 23rd BOC meeting. Are there any objections? The approval of the minutes passes by unanimous consent. Now we have the discussion of the next set of BOC work sessions and meetings. The first work session we'll discuss is the September 8th work session. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a couple of suggestions or amendments to the September 8th agenda.
Okay.
I'll go down them quickly. Call to order, I changed from 5 minutes to 2. Approval of the agenda remains at 1 minute. Resident speak out, I changed from 30 minutes to 15. And then under work session topics.
Can I suggest we just go through the topics and then we'll worry about the times afterwards?
Okay, first topic would be for the work session topic, CEO President evaluation process.
Okay. Do you want to make that motion?
Well, all right, it's going to give them all. Okay, yes, move for approval.
Can I get a second on that?
I'll second it so we can discuss it.
Okay. So basically, okay, I'll let Jenny begin.
Pardon me?
I'll let you begin the discussion on your motion for the CEO evaluation process.
Well, I'm saying it needs to be added to the agenda so we can begin to discuss it.
Yeah.
This is a voting session. This is to look
Yes.
at the evaluation process as drafted and
Okay.
on September 8th.
Okay. Are there any objections to adding the CEO evaluation process to the agenda to discuss on September
8th.
8th?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a committee that's working on that, or will we have a document to look at that point, or is that just?
You'll have a document. I actually I'm drafting it right now. So the impetus behind this was last year's process was not, I will say not too many people were happy with last year's process. So what I want to do is look at trying to make some improvements to that process so that it represents, instead of 10 different viewpoints stapled together, we try to get closer to what represents a board viewpoint.
Okay, thank you.
So it's basically discussing the process, and I'm basically taking the lead myself when drafting it.
Yeah, and I think we have to have that over Lakey to staff by Thursday.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
I think Andy had his hand up.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, Eric, just a couple questions. One, I know Shari also submitted something about a month or so ago about a presidential evaluation, which I think you should consider.
Yes, I've actually taken some for ideas. I've talked to her.
And second, well, there were a couple of topics already kind of like on the agenda: the budget, the MBE, the private utility easement. So So those are still there, and we had some extra time, and so this is one of the things we wanted to add, right?
Yes.
Actually, I had another idea as we go down the agenda of one that's shouldn't be on here. We can handle it a different way.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's important to kind of get a sense of what's on, and then what we can add. You know.
Okay. You
Okay.
want me to read the whole thing? I'd be happy to do that.
You want to go through the whole list then? You want to do it that way? And okay, yeah, you just go through the whole list, Jenny.
Yeah, okay. The second thing is the board, what's written here, the board FY budget discussion. I left that alone. The third thing is the annual MBA. I'm suggesting MBE, I'm sorry, updates report. I'm suggesting that that actually be put in writing so the board can read it in the public and move it down to questions only. Because I don't think we need to spend 25 minutes on that right now. We have a lot of important things that we have to do. Not that that's not important, but the board can simply read the report that the staff will be giving and just ask questions under questions only.
Also note that the MBE policy is less than a year old, so it probably doesn't make sense to edit it right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is we leave the private utility easements, and we add a few things that will not take a lot of time. Stakeholder 2 events, just a discussion on that, so the staff is very clear where the board is, hopefully, on that issue. It's just a discussion. And the next thing is the tot lot policy. The current undated tot lot policy that's in our board book, to look at that and see if there's any need for any amendments. And then the last thing is COVID policy regarding public attending board meetings. So those are the things that I've added to the agenda or left on the agenda. Those are the changes.
So what would the times be for each of these? So if you take off the MBE, that gives us about 15 minutes to play with.
The total time.
I have a question about this process. I mean, are we going to discuss the topics and whether we agree, or is there an opportunity for that?
Sure.
Yeah, Andy was just asking to get the big picture, and the total time that I had was 125 minutes.
You have a question, Lakey?
Yes, on the MBE policy. So first off, the MBE policy has been, you just did a 10-year extension, so it's been in place for quite some time. We do this annually. It's written into the policy that we make a presentation. And I would not agree that it's not an important topic. There will be, to Jenny's point, a written report regardless. I mean, it's part of the policy. We're required to generate a written report, so it's accurate that it would be in the agenda packet. But given the community feedback, this has actually been something that the community has indicated they're very interested in hearing about. So I would just like to voice that. I think so.
I don't think anybody suggested that this wasn't important. I think the suggestion was it's not something that we can really change at this point. And the board can't change the MBE or shouldn't really be changing the MBE policy at this point in the year.
We wouldn't be
but it's not the policy. It's an update. It's the annual report that's in the policy. Yep. Staff has to prepare. So it's not changing the policy, it's the report out that is required in the policy.
When is the annual report due?
Can I just interject here?
Sure.
For a moment. The reason I think it's important to have a report out and not just have the written document, particularly this year, is that this is the first year that change was made, that the staff is actually going to be reporting out figures and background and information about how that program is working. And I think this year it would be significant. I don't know that it would necessarily require 25 minutes because there's not necessarily a debate, but we do want to know how it's working and what changes have come about, because so much more effort has been put in this year. So I think there would be a lot of interest in it. Maybe saying 15 to 20 minutes, if that would slice out a little bit of extra time.
So this meeting is pretty. This particular meeting
Eric,
is
I've had my
pretty.
hand up for a while.
Oh, sorry. I can barely see hands on this, but just interject if you have your hand up, please. 'Cause I
Okay.
cannot see hands.
Yeah, I think what I would suggest is that anything that's numbers just be in the report. We don't need to hear not things that we can read. And that any report out, which probably might take 10 minutes, I would think, would be anything that staff has learned, or 1 or 2 points they want to just highlight, that successes or challenges.
Mhm.
But simply to go over, we've had X number of dollars spent, we've had Y number of vendors, we've had this, is that stuff that's just numbers that we can read in a report. There's no need to spend, for my mind, spend time on that. So I would say maybe 10 minutes if we want to keep it as a separate thing.
Okay. Any other? So if we make 10 minutes, Sherry, you think that's enough time?
Brian, I think, had his hand up. Okay.
Yeah.
Andy has his hand
Andy
up.
too. Andy too.
Okay. I'll go Brian first, then Andy.
I didn't see Brian raise his hand.
Brian, you there?
Oh. No, maybe he just signed in. I just saw his name on the screen. Andy.
Okay. And Andy then.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, like 10, 15 minutes, I think 15 minutes actually. But the one thing I would like the staff to kind of highlight is there was a large discussion on the board about some of the metrics. And we kind of wanted to see how they turned out. And this was a topic of huge discussion on the board. So I really think, particularly as Shari said, this is the first year. There's a little questioning of how it's going to look, and staff is well aware of that conversation that went on, and I think they need to at least make sure they address that for the board. And I would say 15 minutes is what. But you give us the report, but the 10-minute and 5 minutes for discussion, because some of the board members may very well have some questions and comments.
Okay.
So this is what I propose doing. Let's get a list of everything that we want and see how far over we are, and then whatever we're over, we can maybe bump to the next month. That sound like a reasonable plan? Jenny?
Yeah, I just have a suggestion. We change the board discussion, which, by the way, I would like to include a discussion of the cap and the annual charge in there. I think that's important. But change that to 45 minutes and then allow 15 minutes instead of 60, and allow 15 minutes for a presentation back under work session, based on the way people are suggesting that the presentation be done. And we can continue that communication, the board can, with staff, so that we get an agreement on the easiest way to present that. And so I think we could probably handle it that way, if that's okay.
Okay, are there any issues with reducing the board budget discussion, especially when we're going to talk about cap and rate?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
So
Lady.
I just want to make clear that there's an hour allocated. This is, by far, I would suggest the board's most important role in terms of the budget. And the way that the process was approved, there is a schedule that we need certain things from the board on a timely basis in order for staff to have enough time to work between meetings, particularly with the target in November and December. So I would really not want us to cut any time out of the board discussion, because what we need at September 8th is a very robust discussion of strategic priorities. We will have some community survey results as part of that. And you'll notice on the 22nd, we're asking for a vote, and we included discussion time there, because for this to be, for staff to have the ability to meet the schedule as it was approved by the board, we really have a filtering process that was how it was. I would not want to cut any of that time, particularly because when the board discussed it at the July 28th meeting, there was very little discussion. And so we really need that for staff to be effective, to have clear strategic priorities identified.
Yeah.
I do have a question, Lakey. What would the board be voting on in September?
So the request, or Susan, did you want to weigh in on that?
Well, so what we would be asking, needing your guidance on and asking you to vote on are the priorities and the desired outcomes. You know, what do you want? What do you expect this budget to focus on, and what do you expect it to achieve? And with some specifics around those priorities, and then taking into consideration the community input. So this is, last year you did the scenarios in July and gave us the guidance that you wanted to look at that we would be providing in October, and then you would be considering and really then establishing more definitively in December what those priorities and guidance is, so we can actually do a draft. With an email question about the annual charge rate and cap, we had gotten feedback that the board didn't like establishing that upfront, early on in the budget process. So it's moved to later. So we were not contemplating that you would be prepared for that you'd be focusing on the priorities at this point. So.
Okay, I imagine we have to have the rate and cap decided before you come up with the final budget draft in January.
So you would have to give us some indication of where you want it to be at the December meeting. That's correct. But you don't have to, you wouldn't set it now, because at this point you'd be looking at possible trade-offs and different priorities and what the community's saying.
So I can certainly see this discussion going 60 minutes, maybe even.
Yeah.
So I'd be hesitant to reduce this to 45. This is definitely a huge topic, and
Yeah.
it'd be hard pressed to cut it off at 60.
Yeah.
So,
Eric? Oh, okay,
yes.
sorry. We have time at the end that we can just use for the bringing the MBE back on there for the 15 minutes. We have 27 or so minutes left at the end that we just won't use for potential topics for discussion. I have to add this up again, but I could see how we can do this and get it all in there, which would be a total of 140 minutes.
So let me work backwards. So moving the MBE from 25 to 15 minutes, that gives us 35 minutes of wiggle room. So how long do you expect for the CEO evaluation?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. COVID in person?
5.
5 minutes. The
Top
CA
five.
dinners?
Uh,
top-
5. That's just kind of where we are type thing. 5. It's,
And the tot lots?
I would think 10 minutes should do it.
10 minutes. So that gives us 10, 20.
Andy has his hand up.
Just doing some quick math. 10, 20, 40. That's probably doable. Andy?
I don't think we're going to be able to do the tot lot policy in 10 minutes. I really don't, because I think it's going to generate discussion. I thought that's what we were going to do, is basically discuss the policy. Staff has proposed a policy, okay? And they've asked us, to adopt it. But I don't think, given that we have 3 definitely new board members, and especially since this, the tot lot has turned out to be a topic of great interest here recently. I just can't imagine we're going to do it in 10 minutes. The first, you'd want the staff to at least do a presentation to remind everyone, because some of us, some people weren't here when they gave the presentation, over a year ago. I mean, I think you're going to need at least 30 minutes on the tot lot discussion, the policy.
But I don't think I was here when that presentation was given.
Yeah, that's true. You may not. You weren't. You're right.
So this.
Well,
So my point.
Well, we can always get started.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't
Is
think
there
it
a
was the
deadline
whole-
on this? I mean, if we get started on it,
Yeah.
if we need more time, we bump it to the next meeting.
Yeah, and I didn't really have in mind what you're talking about, Andy. I saw that coming later when we have the staff share what we already got, which is the tot lot report that they were doing. I wouldn't call it policy, the tot lot report. And then we could discuss that. But I just had more in mind that the one issue that keeps coming up with the tot lot in Hickory Ridge, that could look at what our current undated tot lot policy in the book is and how it relates to that particular tot lot. And I don't see that taking forever. So I had a very narrow focus in terms of the board hearing that and perhaps making a decision at the September 22nd board meeting on that issue and getting it off the table. Quite
So
honestly.
I'll ask a quick question. Do we actually need to talk about the CA dinners in an open meeting? It just seems like we have them. I'm not sure that's
Well,
something
they're
that needs
not
to be.
in the FY23 budget. So the reason staff put that on there as a suggested topic is because they were not budgeted for in the FY.
You're
You're
breaking up.
breaking up.
23 budget. And there was direction by some board members. We expect there was not consensus. And so having that discussion in an open meeting so that clear on what the steps are, because it is not allocated in the budget and staff suggested doing something different. Some board members agreed and some didn't. So that was the reason we suggested it.
I mean, how much are we talking
In terms of time,
in terms of money?
I think that's actually a point of discussion because we suggested something that was a lower budget and some board members indicated they did not like that idea. In the email chain, when it was taken offline, and we do have to be careful to not conduct business via email. And so when there was not consensus, that's why we suggested having it in an open board meeting as an item of discussion.
It's always been done in an open board meeting when we've talked about these things, so I have no problem with that. I mean, there are decisions to be made.
Okay. So
Yeah, may I say
yeah,
something?
Ginny.
I think it's a very limited discussion based on reality of one, the time frame right now, the budget, et cetera. I am planning on coming in with a real quick proposal and see what the board members think. So we can get this thing moving.
Okay, so
On what the staff has already sent us. So I don't see it as a long discussion. It's either sort of up and down. If people want to have a huge event, then, probably wind up with nothing this year. So, I think 5 minutes will do it easily.
okay, so this is what I propose. We've got 35 minutes to play with. I think the tot lot policy requires more than 10. So what if we do the CEO evaluation for 15, the COVID in person for 5, the CA dinner for 5, and the tot lot policy for 15? That adds up to 40, and we can find some 5 minutes somewhere.
I have a clarification. So you keep coming back to the word tot lot policy, but when Jenny just spoke, what staff put on here was very specifically the 6 pence tot lot renovation. So I just want to clarify, given what Andy said and then what Jenny said, that for 15 minutes, it is very specifically around the 6 pence tot lot renovation. Is that accurate?
So the two are related. The question I have is, does the 6 pence renovation, is that consistent with our current policy, which means we need to look at our current policy? So to make sure that what they're proposing is consistent. So we need to define what our current policy is, and if we need to make changes to it, this might be a good opportunity to do so, because the current policy is undated, and it's not necessarily clear. We've got actually a couple of different policy books. There's one dealing with the playgrounds going back to 2006. So I think it's important that we look at the 6 pence top lot in terms of policy.
I would agree, and yet I would hate to bump up against a time constraint when we could have solved the one more limited question. I think we can note, yes, the policy needs to be adjusted here and here, but if the focused question is, are we going to go ahead with the proposed 6 penny top lot renovation that the village has proposed, or that CA staff proposed, or whoever's been proposing things, I would love to see us do that, even if we need to punt the whole policy till later.
Well, I think it's still important to know whatever they're proposing, is that consistent with policy?
I agree with that.
Yeah. So
That doesn't mean we need to change the policy this month. We could just do a waiver and an exception, and then note where we need to be working on the policy.
Well, first we should figure out if it's consistent or not. That's the first thing.
Well, that would be the purpose of the discussion, and to hear back as to whether it is or isn't.
I mean, yeah, the danger I see is this could be a much longer conversation than 15 minutes, having seen last year's conversations around the 6 pence top lot, which have taken a couple hours of board time. So
No, I think we have to be much more disciplined than what happened last year. And also, at some point, I would like to see the board address tot lot and playground policy, or establish guidelines under both of those things, but not now. I think that's going to take a lot of time. So this is just really deal with that issue and how it relates to the tot lot. I hate to keep using the word policy because it has not been approved, really. It was a proposal.
Oh yeah, but that's not the policy. The policy is what's approved. That's
Right.
my point.
Right. So I think in 15 minutes, we either resolve it and then actually the vote would be on the 22nd, and it'll go up or down.
I mean, we could say that this is getting into the weeds at this point, but one of the questions we could ask is, does the proposal meet current policy? That could be the key question that we ask regarding 6 pence for this, and that should take 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I would like to propose this. So CEO evaluation 15 minutes, the COVID in-person discussion 5 minutes, CA dinner 5 minutes, and the 6 pence renovation with regard to current policy at 15 minutes. And that would, I think, put us 5 minutes over, in which case we could reduce the call to order to 1 minute and propose new topics to 1 minute. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Can I,
Can I get a second?
Second.
Can you go over the agenda again, because I'm lost on what we're doing?
So what we're doing is, to the agenda, call to order goes from 5 minutes to 1 minute. We add the MBE discussion goes from 25 minutes to 15 minutes. We add the CEO evaluation at 15 minutes, the COVID in-person discussion at 5 minutes, the CA dinner at 5 minutes, the top lot 6 pence issue at 15 minutes, and proposed new topics goes from 2 minutes to 1 minute. And that puts us, I think, exactly on time.
Oh, what about the easement?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
That's still there, 10 minutes, no change.
10 minutes. There's no change to that.
No change.
And how much are you setting aside for the presidential evaluation discussion?
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
We can always go over with the majority vote of the board. If it's needed, people will have it in advance to read.
And it'll be like a page or so.
And we're not talking about the actual evaluation, we're just talking about the process.
Just the process.
That it says,
I wanted to state that I do want to bring up that the ethics policy revision is, from staff's opinion, critically important. And, you know, it has not, we started this process in March and will now be in September. And that is being, you know, not addressed. And so I just wanted to bring up that, you know, it would be nice to get the ethics policy revision onto the board agenda so that we can keep that moving and get it approved.
I have it on the board agenda. I haven't gotten to that agenda yet. I agree.
I agree.
Eric, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where the sixpence renovation, tot lot renovation is concerned, what materials are going to be presented? I'd like Andy, I'm kind of struggling to get a sense of, especially for the new board members, will the board be looking at materials from open space and what has been proposed from open space? And then looking at what has been requested by the village center, I mean, the village board. That's detailed information and they're two very different things. And I think that will necessitate not having a vote, but possibly if you keep it to the time limit that you have now, that will push it into the work session in October.
Well, this is.
So I think it's necessary to just be aware of that if there are two different proposals that the board is going to be looking at.
Yeah, so this is not going to be voted on this work session.
Right.
So this is a work session. Depending on how that discussion goes, we could have the vote in September or we could have it in October.
I think, though, I agree with Shari, is that, you know, if you're going to do two presentations, basically, I mean, here's what I'll say the current status is, and here's what the village status is, you know, that's going to take time. And then the board is going to have to discuss that. You know, we have a hard time. We have a very difficult time, you know, holding our discussions of issues that are of great interest to us, you know, in 15 minutes. And that's, you know, you had two different presentations and then you want the board to talk about it. I think we either have to give it more time or, as Shari said, realize that we're going to continue this discussion over into, you know, maybe October.
That could happen anyway. If we start the discussion in October, it could go into November.
Yeah.
Lakey, what are the implications from a construction point of view and a budget spending point of view of, I mean, we're starting to get into cold weather. If let's suppose we made a decision in the September meeting, 22nd or whatever it is, would that tot lot be done by the end of the year? If it was moved to October, would it still be done by, you know, what are we talking about in terms of implications of when this decision is made?
Well, I think that what has not occurred, which is we're certainly supportive of having it an open meeting, is what is the staff being asked? Because we had someone come to Resident Speak Out and give an opinion and then send some emails where a salesperson was included from the manufacturer. So there has not been a request from the board to assess anything from the village because that has not occurred. So we need to be clear on what it is the board even wants us to contemplate. So back to Eric's point, he was bringing up the policy, which is different than what we presented in July of last year. So I think what staff is trying to understand is for the board to get some consensus around what is it you want to pose to CA staff? What are the implications, particularly from a purchasing policy standpoint, from a operational standpoint, as in maintenance, and then from the construction standpoint. So, I mean, those are pretty significant implications. The only way I can answer your question, Alan, in terms of how would the weather impact it, has a lot to do with how timely the decision is, whether we have to go through a different kind of contracting process, what kind of construction and materials. But yes, winter gets more difficult for construction, generally
Well, I
speaking.
guess,
So I can't say that if we have a decision at September 22nd, since I don't know what the decision is, that we can do it by the end of the year. So
if there had been no, and I'm going to use this word perhaps advisedly, perhaps not, I don't know. If there'd been no controversy about this,
Mhm.
would the tot lot have already been installed?
2.5 years ago, yes. Yes, it was on the to be renovated at that time. Mhm. But the village did not want that.
So there has been word from the
Yes, and
village.
so the process is to go to the CA board, which is what this would do. And it was attempted last year. The board voted against it. So it can come back to the board. Obviously, that is absolutely the prerogative of the village.
Okay.
And I believe this is a different design from last year also, that is being proposed by the village. So I think it would be, I think what we're basically asking is to get a, basically just what you outlined, staff's take on the Hickory Ridge design, and basically a interpretation from the board of whether or not this design is within budget and meets our current policy. So if people don't think that's doable, you don't think, Andy?
What I didn't hear from you is an important part that's been playing in all of this, and that's the maintenance. You know, a thing might be within budget, okay, but it might have a maintenance tail that is extremely larger than planned for other things. You know, let's say, I mean, we've got a tot lot, and this tot lot is going to last 10 years, and it's going to, you know, 1/10 of the cost each year for maintenance. I'm just making something up. But then you build a different one that suddenly isn't going to last 10 years. It's only going to last 5 years. And the maintenance is going to be 3 times as much. Well, then that has significant impacts that the board needs to know. You know, we may all like I'll say the second plan, but then when we look at it from a long-term fiscal point, we may say, that's not really the best use of money. So I have a little bit of difficulty with saying it's just, is it in budget or not?
So I'm actually going to interject right there. The current tot lot policy that's undated in the handbook says all tot lots will be completely replaced on a 15-year cycle. So my interpretation of that policy is that any design should have at least a 15-year lifespan. So that's again where I keep on bringing up, yes, we need to look at this in terms of policy, and the policy, I believe, already addresses the concerns you're bringing up. Did I answer your question?
So Eric, what I'm hearing is there are actually 4 pieces of information that's going to have to go to the board. It's what is the current policy? What does the current policy say? What is the plan that CA came up with in discussion with the village? What was the proposed tot lot policy that we spent a lot of time discussing, and what else is being proposed? So there are 4 items that would need to be looked at for this. Does that sound right to people? Are you hearing the same thing?
Can I add to what Sherry was saying, Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I think it has a narrow application. It's simply to the 6-pent tot lot.
I do have one question. Why is what was presented in July relevant? Because it's not policy.
The what?
Why is what was presented in last July, not this past July, but a year ago, Why is that relevant? Because that's not that's not a board policy. It's
It
just
wasn't
what the
proposed policy. It was a study that CA staff did. They were presenting to the board.
Yes.
It was never voted on. It was never suggested as we're going to change policy and this will be it. It was misunderstood. People thought that it happened, but it hadn't. And I stand corrected if I'm wrong.
Yeah, just so to Sherry's point, I'm not sure that's necessarily something we need to get into not last time, but the summer before's presentation.
So it's
Because-
current policy, CA's plan, the village board
Yeah.
plan.
Susan has her hand up.
Eric?
Okay, Susan?
So it's my understanding that it was not officially approved by the board, but the board actively used it and used it in their discussion of the tot lots, and CA staff used it to help develop the budget for tot lot replacements for FY23. And so it was part of the justification for not approving the 6 pence tot lot that the village wanted. So I just wanted to clarify that. So it was applied, whether it was policy or not.
We should be working off of policy. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Andy?
Well, but I think that brings up, it does relate in a way to policy, and it brings up an important point. If all the planning and all the budgeting that is done last year and is currently under process is based on, I'll say the July 28th, I'll call it the rascal thing. If that's the way the organization is budgeting and everything, and if we do the 6 pence tot lot, does that mean then now other tot lots can also kind of follow the 6 pence? It's like, is this going to be a unique one-time situation? Okay, it's at 6 pence tot lot, or when the next set of tot lot renovations are proposed, which are coming up in this coming budget, is CA staff going to have to then look at all of those and treat them like tot lot, like 6
Andy,
pence?
I think we're actually getting into the discussion that we want to have in September versus the agenda.
Right.
So so I want to try to just stick to the agenda. So you bring some good points up, but I think those are things that need to be discussed at the work session. That's why we have the work session. So I don't want to necessarily solve this here. I just want to make sure that people are okay with having this on the agenda, and that 15 minutes, as small as it is, we might be able to get somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think otherwise we are going to spend the next hour on this, and I don't.
Yeah, so, which of course.
Besides that, you can't have just a few board members saying yes,
Yeah,
no, let's put it on, let the whole board.
Yeah, so again, can I get back to my original? So we got a motion. Can I call the question? Or is there any further discussion on the adjustments to the agenda? Okay, I will call the question. So on the motion I forget who actually made the motion at this point. I think it was by Alan, seconded by, it's by Ginny and seconded by Alan, to amend the agenda as follows: to add the CO evaluation for 15, the COVID for 5, the dinner for 5, tot lot 6 pence for 15, reduce the MBE to 15, reduce the call to order to 1, reduce the proposed new topics to 1. I will take a vote on that. Ginny?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion passes. So that takes care of the September 8th work session. Moving on to the September 22nd meeting. We have 31.
I'm sorry, Eric, sorry.
Yes.
There's one correction that needs to be made on all of these. It says pre-filed. Sherry, need the support on this. Pre-filed state legislation. We have really, I think, made it clear that it needs to be pre-filed Howard County and Maryland state legislation, because we do want to look at
Right.
the legislation. So that needs to be changed on all the agendas, if that could be done, please, and then I won't keep repeating it. Is that okay?
Yeah, I agree with that. I believe we discussed that last year.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Well, if everybody agrees,
Is there a second to the motion? Someone, please. Anyone? I'll second it.
Second.
Any objection? Okay, Alan seconded. Any objections? Okay, no objections. The motion passes. So that should be updated globally.
oh, excuse me, one more thing.
Okay.
Sorry, this is under questions only on this agenda.
Okay.
Okay, that spotlight on Columbia stays the same. We just changed the pre-filed legislation. We've moved annual MBE back up to where it was. And then I want to add the Lake Elkhorn flow chart, which we are told that we'll get on September 8th. So I assume a couple of days before. And if we put that under questions only, we're still talking about, I think there was 20 minutes allocated to all three of those, but we really should have that on there. We get it. If people have questions, they should be able to ask them. I
Well,
think
A second on that?
I don't know that we should
flow
make,
chart, the flow chart for
Yeah.
like Elkhorn project that we've been asking for, it was, I believe, promised for September 8th.
it was,
This would be under,
so from my
Okay.
point of view, I'm not sure we should make an assumption that staff can then therefore have it on the 6th.
Well, I'm asking that it be added to the board, but not in a presentation, just in questions only, so that when you read it, or you have questions, that's the opportunity to ask it, so that it's not one board member contacting the staff or another one. We do this as a group. And you have to make the assumption if we're supposed to get it on that date, and it should be done in discussed in a public meeting, then therefore you would just assume it would be put in the packet.
can I get a second on this before we continue discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I get a second? Anyone?
I'd like to actually hear a little, before we discuss a motion, I'd like to hear some more just discussion on
On what?
the topic itself, I'd like to know from Lakey, when should we expect it before the 8th? Should we expect it as part of the packet, which would be a week before the 8th? Should we expect it on the 8th, in which case there's no point in putting it on the agenda because I'm not going to have time to read it to do questions.
So we had suggested it as a staff topic. If you'll notice, so we were comfortable having it prepared ahead of the meeting. However, since it didn't come up, I didn't bring up this point. I am not 100%. We can have it on the Friday that we post, but we can absolutely have it posted prior to the meeting as early in the following week as we can. But in advance of the board meeting, yes.
Great.
I would caution that it sure could be helpful to have subject matter experts present it, but that's of course just my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree. This has been such a hot topic. I just cannot imagine we just put a flow chart out there without any explanation, without the public being able to even kind of say I'll ask questions, because my guess is if we put it out there, we better add more time on resident speak out, because they're going to be residents who are going to ask questions about it. I mean, this has been such a hot topic. My guess is we're going to need 30 minutes on the flow chart, because you want staff to present it, and there are going to be a lot of questions, I think, from the board as well. I just can't imagine this is just a questions only type of topic.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the Watershed Advisory Committee is meeting on the 10th. So if materials are prepared, I think that's sort of like a little preview. It gives John McCoy an opportunity to do his presentation about it. And the watershed folks will be asking questions, and that helps us to preview what the community may be asking as well. So, you know, I think that would be significant.
Can I propose moving this to the 22nd?
Yeah, I think it's a much better, we put it on the 22nd as an actual agenda item.
As a discussion item.
Yeah, as a discussion item. And I think
Okay.
we're going to need 30 minutes because it is, I mean, how many emails have we gotten from people? And how much resident speak outs have we had over this issue?
Okay, I put it on there.
Okay, so can we go on to the 22nd? So we've got the flow chart for half an hour tentatively, which takes up all the time. Is there any other adjustments we need to make to the agenda?
Yeah, a couple of adjustments, okay? Besides the usual change the call to order to 2 minutes instead of 5, residents speak out to 20, which reduces that to 26 minutes total. Board votes. Utility easements is on there, but we need to add the CEO president evaluation process for 20 minutes under board votes.
Okay.
And board votes, budget strategies is already there for 30. We need to reserve, if anything's going to happen, 5 minutes for a vote on the tot lot and the in-person meeting 5 minutes. The whole COVID policy regarding public attending board meetings would be the title of that one.
Yeah, so that'll be 5 minutes for both. So that would put us at, I'm estimating that puts us at 30 minutes over with the flow chart.
Yeah, flow chart is another, really 30? Wow.
Yeah, so you got the CEO.
And we're still not hitting ethics. So again, we're still not addressing
I'm getting to ethics, believe me.
and
I'm
working on it.
Give me a chance, ethics. I'll be talking ethics in a minute. So that adds 95 for the board votes, the timing.
That's 30 for the board
I'm
votes.
sorry, no, I'm sorry. The Lake Elkhorn goes down there. I'm sorry. The flow
That's
chart,
30 to board votes.
65.
Yeah, but we only have 30 left. So we're over by 30.
20, 30.
I also would strongly caution that if we're putting Lake Elkhorn stream restoration as a discussion item, it would not be a meeting to actually reduce resident speak out time, Alex.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, that's right. I would.
We're just talking about the flow chart.
But people will want to weigh in.
Yeah, I wouldn't change the resident speak out time. I mean, that's 30 minutes is short.
All right, I was just relating to the flow chart there. I'm suggesting for the October 13th, we get more of an update on, and I was going to get to that on Lake Elkhorn with some other suggestions here. So that would take more time. That would be 60 minutes.
Yeah, but we can't control what residents want to speak out and how, how many there are.
Yeah, we can't change the resident speak out time. That's just not.
Well, then what we could do is under the October 13th is another possibility where it has have update from WSSI and CA staff on how they address the MDE and the Army Corps of Engineers concerns, and we could add flow chart to that, and that's 60 minutes. If you want to combine both, both on October 13th under board discussion. I don't know what you think of that, guys.
Okay, so can I get a motion to?
Then we'd still not have ethics. We'd be at the first meeting in October and still haven't touched
ethics on that October 13th.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Ethics. Okay.
If you made that change. Well, I'm having a really hard time following the conversation.
So
But
where
but
we're
maybe that's just me. Maybe that's,
okay, so where we're at is adding to this, adding with 31 minutes, we're going to add the vote on the CEO evaluation process for 20 minutes. The
Right.
tot lot 6 pence for 5 minutes. The in-person vote for 5 minutes, and that puts us right on the schedule.
No, the
So-
utility thing is also 5 minutes.
The utility is already on here.
And the board FY 2024 budget
That's already on here also.
is 30 minutes.
That's already on here. So I'm just talking about changes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So the changes are, we've got 31 minutes to play with.
Yeah,
Can I get a motion to add the CEO evaluation vote for 20, the tot lot for 5, and the in-person for 5?
so moved.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Any further discussion?
and so we are not, you have eliminated the Lake Elkhorn stream restoration flow chart completely
That
from
would
the
have been
September
under-
22nd meeting.
Well, if it
Yes.
had been, it would have been under board discussion, but we haven't, this is.
I'm
only-
just asking a question because I've
Yes,
written that down.
that-
It's now not on the September 22nd. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, call a question?
I do have a question though. What would we be voting on in terms of the tot lot?
So we'd be voting on any amendments to the policy, based on the discussion from the previous meeting. So we've got a work session.
Right.
So we'd be voting on if someone proposed a amendment to the current policy, and B, we'd be voting potentially on a resolution to approve the a design for 6 months.
Well, but how can we do that without the information from staff on how much it's going to cost? I
That comes in the
don't
meeting.
understand.
That comes in the meeting, the work session.
No, we're not having it at the work session. Like you just said, they won't have that information.
They won't? I thought they were going to have that information.
No, they aren't going to have that.
Can I get some guidance on what information we're going to get for September 8th meeting regarding the tot lot?
According to my notes on what you said you wanted at that meeting was to attach to the materials is the existing tot law policy from 2006, is the staff guidelines for the tot law policy, which were developed in July 2001. Then you want, according to the list, we're supposed to put forward what we put forward last year, which we had worked in collaboration with the village on, that the board rejected. And then we're going to attach what the village sent in, which the staff recently sent in, which the staff has not at all been involved in. CA staff's not been remotely involved in that.
What would it take to get the CA staff's take on what this current proposal, whatever it's called?
We would like the board to actually say, can you evaluate this? Because it will take staff time to evaluate it and answer some of the questions that you indicated about construction and that I indicated in terms of if, which is big ifs, but I mean, what's
You're breaking up. You may want to turn your video off.
just about
Yeah,
the village.
Lakey, turn off your video, you're breaking up.
We can't hear you.
See if that works. Okay, try again. Can't hear you at all.
Contractor. I mean, so we have to go through the entire purchasing policy contract.
So unfortunately, we got a bit.
So did you understand my list?
Unfortunately, we got about 10%
Did you
of that.
understand my list?
Lakey, we haven't
We got about
heard
10%
a
of
word
that.
you said. You've been breaking up.
Okay. You can't hear me at all?
Now we can. So maybe
Now we can.
video off and just
Okay, so I'll restate the list. So according to my notes, as you were talking about what would be attached in the September 8th meeting is
that we
existing
got.
tot law policy from, okay, you got that. So then what I was saying is we would like the board to be in agreement on what it is CA staff is to assess, because all we have received is emails from the village that they would like these things. It has to go back to the board for that decision, because anything that is outside the normal operational assumptions that are in the FY23 budget, it's a board decision, just like it was last year when it was rejected. So we would not present an assessment because we need to get clear on what the board is asking us to assess.
So
Having
I
an
think-
email sent from a village board member to CA staff cannot be the start of a process for CA to spend resources. That would not be prudent.
Agreed.
So I think we as a BOC can, by putting this on the agenda, basically sort of make that decision that, yes, we as a BOC think that staff should allocate resources into assessing the proposed Hickory Ridge design.
So that the board will
So
be.
the
able
board can make an informed decision on it.
Right. And the whole board needs to be involved, which they are not at this point, which is why you want it on the agenda for September 8th, especially the new members that have no idea what was going on. So the sooner we get this going, the better.
So I was reading the list, is the notes I took from what we just discussed on September 8th. So what you're asking for now is different, to Andy's point, than what you just said you wanted on the 8th.
I think we basically want enough information to make an informed decision on whether or not the tot lot is consistent with the existing policy, and if not, why not? And also consistent with the current budget. So those are the two. So for the tot lot to go ahead, I see it needs to be consistent with two things: the current policy and the current budget. And if it's consistent with both, then you could, the board could decide to go ahead with it. So that's the two key things that I'm interested in.
Okay.
Can I just interject? So this is Monday night, and this is to be posted on Friday. So and I know Lakey's connectivity is not strong, but I would be concerned about committing to being able to answer those questions by Friday.
I don't think they need to be answered by Friday. I think we just need the general materials. The question could be answered on the next Thursday during the meeting.
Well, the general materials are answering the questions, right, about whether this is according to the policy or not, or otherwise we'll just attach the policies and
Yeah, you can attach the policies, attach the proposals, and that's what would go in the packet. We don't necessarily need the opinion in the packet. That could come during the meeting.
So you don't need to know the cost or any of that.
Yeah, we do need to know the cost,
By the meeting.
but not necessarily.
So you wouldn't think that should be posted?
No, the cost would be posted.
We won't have that by then. That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure we can commit to these things by then. So the maintenance, this cost is, and the assessment. And then are we to work off of the email we got from a resident? Is that the idea?
No, I would think we'd be working off of what the village is providing. So is the village providing any kind of detailed plans from, is there any kind of detailed plans on this coming from the village?
Yeah, I don't think we got that. I think we got it from a person who's on the village board, but I don't know it was from the, is that official from the village? Are we
No,
to
that's what I'd like
interpret it that way?
And that's what I'd like to know. I mean, did the village board, and maybe it'd be helpful just to reach out to the chair of the Hickory Ridge Village Board on this.
Well, I would think Brian would know, and he was on here for a short while. I wonder if something happened where we lost him.
But I think at any rate, the first step would be to reach out to the chair of the Hickory Ridge Village Board and possibly the village manager.
So I don't know that we can commit to getting it all together by then. So I don't know what to say about that. we can attach what is there and then you can discuss it. And if there's more information that's needed, I think we'll have to do that at another meeting.
That works.
This has clearly gone on for a long time. I think, you know, let's make sure we do it right and get the information we need so we don't have to keep recurring this.
Well,
I think that's why the suggestion that this really is a two-part. One is the decision to either ask the village for a proposal, which, you know, can be specific and then can be costed out. But I agree that, you know, that's why doing this kind of stuff piecemeal is such a bear. And that's why we struggled with trying to come up with a tot lot policy, although I agree, we did not come to a final vote. But this one tot lot has taken up an inordinate amount of time on the board. And we simply can't get into a situation where every time somebody wants a different kind of tot lot or a different kind of climbing thing, we get thrown back into this situation again. So I think having something that has clear data and evidence and cost associated with it, at least that's something objective that the board can make a decision on. And it seems to me it's going to have to be a two-parter. I just don't see how it can be done, as Susan says, by the earlier meeting to be ready to vote on by the second meeting.
So in that case, the first meeting could focus more on the policy aspect, and we could make a motion to officially ask the Hickory Ridge Village Board for a in-depth proposal that goes back to CA that we can get input on, and we can then comment on it at a later board meeting. Granted, this is going to make the agenda sort of a bit in flux because we can't actually plan for when all that's going to occur because it relies on another village board. But at least that gives us sort of a plan of attack. And if we make that motion in a meeting and literally just formally ask the Hickory Village Board to provide a detailed plan, and maybe staff could help us define what a detailed plan should include, then we can, then that would help. So maybe that would be what we would discuss on the 8th.
I think that makes sense, Eric. And what I suggest is let's just remove the vote on the meeting because we aren't going to have time by that time.
Well, we're going to have to vote on.
Well, if you were going to vote on the recommendation you mentioned, that's good. But not if we're going to vote on choosing the tot lot.
Well, we'll certainly have to vote on the recommendation.
Okay.
I think.
As long as your recommendation sounds okay.
Okay, so we'll go from there, and we might also, if someone wants to propose a amendment to the current policy, if there's any discussion about changing the current policy, that could also be subject to a vote. Also, if there's any small changes.
Eric, I'll warn you that the policy changes require more than one meeting.
That's why.
Right, Shari? It's going to require 3 different. Shari can talk more to that.
I think that will require 2. It will require 1 meeting on the 8th and 1 on the 22nd.
Isn't there a difference between a major policy and a minor policy?
Well, I guess I'm not sure if this is major or minor. I'm not sure how you determine the difference.
The difference with the policies is that this obviously has to do with money and with budget, which is exactly why, you know, it's hooked into budget for the following year, or the allocation of budget funds from the ongoing year. And it can go to a 2 reading rule The policy from staff has already been looked at and debated. So it's not that we're necessarily starting from point zero, but we do have to take into account that there are newer board members that have to be brought up to speed.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant to call something that happened over a year ago reading one, especially when I wasn't even on the board at the time. Okay, so I think we've got a. I don't think this changes anything for the 22nd. So again, we got a motion by Ginny, a second by Alan to add the CEO evaluation for 20 minutes, the in-person COVID vote for 5 minutes, and the tot lot, I guess I'm going to call it now, the formal request for 5 minutes. I will call the question. Ginny? Ginny?
Ginny, your mute's working really
Yes, 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 yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Lakey? Lakey?
Lakey, you can put your vote in the chat.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So the motion passes 5-0. That brings us to October 13th.
Mhm.
Okay, so right now we've got 74 minutes for October 14th that we can play with. So do we have any adjustments to the October 13th meeting?
Well, I have a
This is
question.
a work session.
October
question.
13th?
Yeah, October 13th.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
I see spotlight on Columbia there. I'm wondering, what is our current policy around, is this every month that we review what we used to call the tracking thing, or is it quarterly, or what's the cadence on that?
I'll let Lakey answer that question.
I think Lakey's had to drop off.
It's monthly.
Okay,
Monthly, thank
okay,
you.
monthly.
The first meeting of the month, Susan, right?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I do have an addition to this agenda,
Okay,
and that is discussion of the ethics policy for the Board of Directors, 30 minutes.
okay.
And that's under, oh, okay.
That would be under
Action topic.
work sessions.
Yeah, there's overview of the village, which is already there, and this would be the, although I did wonder if that needed 45 minutes, it couldn't be 30 minutes.
Let's start off with 30 minutes and see how much fudge factor we have left.
Okay, and then
Also, this
ethics,
yeah,
30 minutes. So the overview of villages would be 30 minutes, and the ethics is 30 minutes. Okay.
oh, okay. That we still have an hour left in this meeting.
Well, I have a topic for that.
Okay.
Okay, and it looks like it might combine the flow chart, but it would be WSSI and staff and anyone else that we think is relevant present an update. So we'd receive an update from the WSSI staff and CA staff on how they address or will be addressing the MDE and the Army Corps of Engineers concerns about the Lake Elkhorn project. We just want to hear what they have to say. And that would be 60 minutes.
And this will include the flowchart discussion.
And flow chart discussion, yes.
Okay.
So it's all, so that we don't confuse people, it's all one night.
Okay.
And it would also give us the benefit of, as Sherry said, the Watershed Committee, I think, was meeting September 10th, Sherry? John is presenting.
Okay. So I got a motion by Ginny to add 30 minutes for the ethics policy, reduce the overview of the villages to 30 minutes, and add the Lake Elkhorn and flowchart and WSSI meeting for 60 minutes.
Second.
I got a second by Alan. Any discussion on this? Okay, no discussion. I will call the question. Ginny,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Lakey, So you can just put your vote.
Janet,
Can you-
there you are.
Can
You're
you put your,
very breaking up. Like maybe you could call in on the phone.
can you just put it in the chat for now? Lakey, can you put your vote in the chat, please? I vote yes. So the motion carries 4-0-0.
400.
4-0-1.
I don't think she abstained, so
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
don't
you
either.
can call that
I'm
abstaining.
not sure what to call it. I can't hear her.
She was
I don't think she-
absent.
Yeah, she
Right,
wasn't
Alan?
here for the
Okay,
discussion.
4-0-0. I'll call it 4-0-0 then. Thanks for the question. Oh, now she abstains. So it's 4-0-1. Okay. So that brings us to the last topic on the agenda is the November 10th meeting. We've got 57 minutes left on.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Oh, October 27th. Skip
27th.
one.
Yeah, October 27th.
Oh, did I miss something? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I missed something.
You said
Sorry.
November.
No, that's okay.
Sorry, I jumped a month. I
Yeah.
jumped a week.
Okay, same changes where call to order is 1 minute and resident speak out is 20. Board votes, the ethics policy would be on there for 15 minutes.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there'd be anything else at this point. Board discuss, you want me to go on with what should be under board discussion?
Yes.
All right, board discussion. The issue of the CA votes and how they're handled in village elections would be 15 minutes. And then the other is CA tree and encroachment presentation. So what is the policy? 20 minutes.
What was the last one you said?
The CA tree policy encroachment policy.
An encroachment policy presentation, 20 minutes. And that's under board discussion, and the CA votes in the village elections and how that's handled, excuse me, is 15 minutes. And then, of course, the board discussion on the budget is still 60 minutes.
Okay, so I got a motion by Ginny. We actually don't need to adjust the top times right now. So I got a motion by Ginny to add the ethics vote for 15 minutes, a discussion on how CA votes in elections for 15 minutes, and discussion on the tree policy and the encroachment policy for 20 minutes. Can I get a second on that?
You did say tree, T-R-E-E.
TREE.
Okay, I didn't know. what
Tree,
you
like
meant.
tree, oak,
Like-
elm
Got
disease.
it. Okay. I'll second.
Yeah, like, okay. Any discussion on this?
Yeah, I would like to add that I think you're gonna have to add at least 30 minutes for the ethics discussion. I mean, I just can't imagine that we had 30 minutes on October 30th and we're gonna all decide, and then in 15 minutes, we're just gonna resolve everything. I think we need a little bit more time.
Well, let me compromise with you. How about 25 minutes, and I can take another 3 minutes from the call to order and make that 2 minutes.
Okay,
And that gets us within time.
I think Ginny had already reduced the call to order to 1 minute.
Yeah, well,
Correct.
yeah, she did. So
Resident speak out.
25. So
I have a
tw-
question about what's needed before the November meeting, as far as budget is concerned. Susan, you mentioned that the building of possible scenarios, was something that you had gotten last year. By what date?
So we're not going to do the scenarios again. That just didn't work. The board seemed to struggle with that. So we don't need anything in November. The next decision point for the board is the December meeting.
Okay,
So that's,
so maybe what we do need, however, is some information, data coming to the board that would help to illustrate the issues around CAP and around, these are sort of the ongoing, issues. We try to build that in as early on in the process. So I'm thinking maybe we have a little more time this year to actually be able to get data that would help the board in any subsequent discussion. We usually miss a meeting. Don't we usually miss a meeting in December? We only have one.
in November, so you only have one meeting in December.
Yeah, so that's going to make it very tight. So maybe we can push that in there where we start to look at membership and CAP and all of that information.
Well, we've got an
So
hour
Susan,
already slated there for budget.
okay, I guess the question I have for Susan is, when do we need to vote on rate and cap?
In February, but you need
In
to give us
February.
guidance on it in December. You need to give us a sense of whether, kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, do you want to increase the rate or the cap in December in order for us to do a draft, but you don't vote on it until February.
Yeah, but the board really has to give the guidance because you've got to build it out.
So
So that pushes it much earlier.
the issue I
No,
have.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So in October, at the October 27th meeting, we will be providing our capital project allocations and some draft operating budget views that show the fixed and changeable expenses based on the guidance that you give us at the September 22nd meeting. So you will have data to review to see whether this is going the way that you want. It's addressing your strategic objectives and delivering the outcomes that you want. And you'll have opportunity to discuss that at the October meeting, October 27th, the November I think it's 10th meeting, and at December 8th. And then in December 8th, we'd ask you to come to some consensus that this is what you want. At that point, this is the way you want to go with the rate and the cap, but you don't actually, it's not set in stone until February.
So I do have a concern, Susan, with that, because, okay, we could tell you this is in November or December, this is where we want to go.
Right.
You build out the budget based on that. And then in January, if we're voting on it, and then the board decides to vote on something different, that would mess up the entire budget.
Right. So you can't, you have to continue to sort of winnow down your expectations and your guidance and come to some conclusion. If, I don't, the fee, you guys didn't like voting on the annual charge and the rate and the cap earlier in the process. So, and this way you get to see what the trade-offs entail. If there's more you want to do and you want to increase them, then you have this opportunity much later in the process and with a lot more deliberation than you ever did, except for last year.
I guess my concern is I don't want to get to the point where we're voting on rate and cap and you've already got the budget prepared around a particular rate and cap. So I want to make sure that whatever we're voting on gives you ample opportunity to design the budget around that.
I'm hearing that that's what they're asking for, and it's not a black box process where we have a work session where we talk about it. They make a budget, all of a sudden it shows up in February and we vote on it. We're going to see it. And I really like this version because I do want us to be able to talk about the trade-offs. That's really something that we haven't often been able to talk about before we finalize those things. So I'm comfortable that we're going to have plenty of time to discuss it to avoid the doomsday scenario, Eric, that you're positing.
I guess my point is when we need to lock in the rate and charge, that's when I want to have the vote. So I want to make sure that when we absolutely need to lock in that rate and cap, we vote on it. Because I don't want to say, okay, we're sort of locked into it. Okay, we discussed it and we're locked into it now. And now we're going to vote on it later after we're already locked into it. It's kind of it presents kind of a weird vote where, okay, we're already locked into it, but now we're voting on it. So I want to make sure that when we're we're not locked in prior to the vote. The vote locks us in.
Eric? Okay.
Jenny?
Yeah. I frankly did not understand why we did it the way we did last year in terms of that second vote, which I think was in February, wasn't it, Susan? A vote on the cap and the annual charge. It was like, there were 3 things on the agenda we had to vote on. That was one of them.
Right, you always vote on it in final in February. Right.
What I'm saying is, I don't understand why we're not voting sooner, in that then you know what your revenue is, so that you know how you can build your base, your budget based on how much revenue you're going to get in. You already know all your expenditures, or at least a lot of them that are fixed. So I don't understand why we don't want to do it now. If we're not willing to raise the assessment or raise the annual, the cap or their annual charge, we should be telling you that now. If there are 6 of us that don't want to do that for whatever reason, and you should know that now so that you can prepare the budget. If you don't do that, I don't know how you prepare a budget without maybe putting us in a position of, you've got more expenditure than revenue if we vote not to raise it, and then we're going to have to cut something, or you're going to have to cut something. So I don't understand why we're doing it this way.
I understand your concern. I guess I come at it a little bit differently. I think if we decide on a yes/no vote around the rate and the cap and all that, and we do that way early, that ends up being a political vote rather than a budgetary vote. It ends up being a, what do we think we can sort of get away with, if you will. I don't mean that negatively, in our villages, rather than an informed vote around what are the trade-offs, what are the implications of raising it this much, what are the implications of raising it that much, what are the implications of keeping it the same. I'd rather have that information, and we can't have that information until we get at least somewhere into the budget process.
I would think we could have all that information by December, and we could vote on the rate and cap in December. Would that make sense, Susan? Because we got to provide you guidance in December on rate and cap.
If you're ready in December to vote on the budget, then vote on the budget in December, and we don't have to wait till February, if that's what you're saying. I don't really understand what we're discussing.
No, not the entire budget, just the rate and cap.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank goodness. So I just want to echo, I think, the points that Susan and Alan have made, and particularly that's exactly why we made the changes we did last fiscal year. And the feedback both from the board but also from the community was, instead of deciding what the rate and cap was at the beginning when it wasn't clear, because to Jenny's point, if you decide that early, or I guess both to Jenny and Eric, then we are already deciding what can't fit in the budget, versus the board identifying their priorities at the beginning, and then us as staff attempting to align the budget to those priorities. And based on board discussion, things are going to be more important or less. And that prioritization is what is going to inform us to be able to say, here's the point where the trade-offs start. Is the trade-off of keeping X service or starting something else or ending something else, is that worth it? Becomes an informed decision instead of a rather arbitrary one at the beginning of whether you're going to, and frankly, the time for us matters, because the implications of inflation are an ongoing issue for us operationally that are changing week over week. And even the difference between later in the process is going to help us better inform the board to make the best decision possible for the community.
So I see what you're saying. So I think the process is we vote on a sort of what I'll call a baseline rate and cap. And then based on the budget, if we want to edit the budget, then you have to sort of edit the rate and cap accordingly. So if you want to add a whole bunch of stuff in or delete a whole bunch of stuff, then the rate and cap could be adjusted sort of in balance with the changes to the budget through the process in January and February. That's that the way I understand it correctly?
I think the only thing you're leaving out, Eric, is that there will be plenty of discussion in each meeting about
Well,
possibilities for the budget, about priorities for the budget. And
I count several hours already allocated, so
Yeah,
I would assume there'd be plenty
exactly.
of discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this makes sense. So we got a motion by Ginny. I think we got a second by Alan to add the ethics vote for 25 minutes. The CA votes, CA voting on CA votes for 15 minutes, and the discussion on the CA votes for 15 minutes, and discussion on the tree and encroachment policy for 20 minutes. I'll call the question.
Well, I have one other amendment I'd like to add to that, because I think we
Sure.
still have some time. And that's, I'd like us to take a look at the anti-nepotism policy, particularly as it applies to part-time, short-term workers.
How
I
much time would
have
you?
that in the November 10th agenda, Alan.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Then what I'd like to add is the a discussion of returning advisory committees all to have official liaisons.
So one issue I've got with that is we changed the policy in April. So I would prefer to make that change, give the current policy at least a year, and make that change next April if so desired. That way you have a year of information, see how it works, get feedback from the committees, if that's okay. And if we put that on under potential topics for discussion and make a note of it to make sure that gets on an April agenda. Because otherwise I think we get into policy whiplash if we change a policy that rechange it like just a few months later.
I will accede to that.
Okay. So
I have a question. I want to make sure that I heard correctly that on October 13th, there's a 30-minute discussion of ethics, and now for the board vote on the 27th, there's a 25-minute discussion.
5-minute vote.
We'll vote.
Discussion and vote.
Okay, right, discussion and vote. So I just wanted to reiterate, I heard part of Andy saying extend it, and I just wanted to be, I guess, have a concern about the amount of time we've allocated, because we've been working on it, but we're not clear on, the motion failed, but there's been nothing substantive that has come back from the board. So we have something that staff is almost wrapped up analyzing, but that's a total of 55 minutes between a discussion and a vote. And in terms of the number of times, it's fine, but in terms of the total allocation to revise an ethics policy, it does seem to still be short on time. So I would just ask if we could expand that time. I think it would be important for the organization.
I think we can make it 40 minutes on the 27th, and we're still within target.
Yeah, I don't see that. I see you're already over.
I see that we've added 60 minutes.
Right.
Right, but I was
So-
saying 57 minutes extra minus plus the 10 reducing resident speak out plus the full.
No, I don't think we can actually reduce resident speak out. I think
That was part of the motion. So,
Yeah.
but in any case, it's an hour.
yeah, it's an hour.
Well, don't we have a rule that if we do need to go beyond the time, the majority of the board agrees, we do it.
Correct.
We state how much time. And
Yeah,
if we're not ready to vote, if we don't have agreement there, we go to another agenda where we bring it up again.
Why don't we make it 30 minutes, and then we got 30 in each meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, we can make it 30 minutes.
Okay.
And then we could reduce the tree policy to 15 minutes.
And then I had a question on what Jenny was referring to as the encroachments policy.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is that, unless didn't hear this correctly from a staff person 6 or 7 months ago, is you now have an approach where senior team get together and talk about possible or alleged encroachment and make a decision. But I'm not sure, so I'd like to just hear that. And I'd also still like to know what's been done about the one we referred August 2021 in Thunder Hill as part of that. So I'd be asking that question again, and I'm getting tired of asking it. That's true.
So it's been answered via email, but in terms of the encroachments, you're calling it a policy. So I just want to be clear that we have not developed a policy. We have developed a process. So what you just described is accurate. There's a work group and there's a process, but you used the term policy, and I just wanted to be clear on that. So you're asking for a staff presentation on how we operationally review encroachments?
Yes, and how do you deal with it or don't deal with it? And what is this email you're talking about that who should have received it on the Thunder Hill situation?
My understanding is the resident was spoken to and an email was done several months ago.
And the second thing we're looking for is
you're asking about a specific resident. I was asking about the encroachments policy, but you brought up a specific situation.
and I think the second thing we're looking at is I'm not sure if it's a policy or process, but when you have CA limbs and CA trees that are potentially threatening private property or residents' houses, what's the policy for having that maintained? And if there's a disagreement, how does that work?
So those are two totally different topics, just so I'm clear. So encroachments of other people onto CA land versus CA trees onto other people's land, that would not be the same topic, just for clarification.
Okay, let's put them into two different topics at 10 minutes each.
Okay. So it would just be a staff presentation on how we handle that.
Yes.
Operationally, okay?
And if there's any policies, I'd want to be aware of them.
And how long it takes to do it, to resolve it. I mean, this
completely depends on the situation.
Well, there should be certain,
These are questions that can be asked during the.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to get into.
Well, let's not get into.
Let's not get into the actual topics. So
right.
The way I see it is we can reduce the call to order to 2 minutes, have the ethics policy at 30 minutes, and then we could have a vote on CA votes, or discussion on CA votes, tree policy, and encroachment procedures for 10 minutes each, and that should put us exactly at 57 minutes. Can I get a motion to do that?
Second, motion moved.
Can I get a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that change, on these edits? Okay, I will call the roll. Ginny.
Yes.
Alan.
Yes.
Andy.
I think I'll vote no, because I don't think the time limits are actually reasonable. I think we're going to go over a lot. The topics are okay, but I just think the time limits are way off.
Okay. Lakey.
No.
I'm a yes. Motion passes 3-2. Okay. The last item on the agenda is the November 10th agenda. We got 57 minutes of wiggle room here. So are there any adjustments to this agenda?
I have an idea, Eric.
Sure.
I'd like to propose we set maybe 30 minutes for discussion on a CA handbook.
Okay. Sounds good.
And that's the director's handbook, not the team member handbook.
No, the CA director's handbook. Sorry. Because we've been asked about that by several of our new members.
Now, Andy, I was wondering whether you were talking about, when you said a handbook, the CA, the old CA policy book, which was for the board members.
No, not a policy book. It's more of a how-to book.
So I have a couple documents here, so I'm not sure what you're referring to, but there's a policy, board of directors policies that Wes gave us, this binder. Then there's also this Columbia Association Board of Directors governing documents. Have I hit on either? Or am I still
No,
missing
that
it?
it's not neither of those. It's something.
Okay.
It
It's
was-
like a how-to. It's a
It was
How
the,
to?
yeah, it was the book that was used for orientation for board members.
I don't
And
believe I've
it
done it.
seems to have many of the things that you were talking about. So if you're talking about addressing it as a handbook, separate from the way it used to be presented, I'm not sure why that would be the case.
And I'm not clear what what force of whatever, I don't know what the right word is, a handbook would have. The way,
Does this handbook exist?
except Andy's draft, I don't think so.
No, it doesn't
Uh,
exist.
I
Right?
So
think
Andy,
you know,
question, does this handbook
Andy,
exist?
the way that Andy is a board member will have some overlap with the way I perform my duties as a board member, but won't necessarily be the same. We're all bound by the same legal requirements, which are spelled out in other documents. I'm not clear what a handbook, other than codifying an individual's way of being a board member is. I don't know what that would mean.
So it seems like more of a training thing. Does this handbook exist? I mean, I've
No.
never seen it.
No, and you're right. Maybe I chose the wrong word and why I said it like a how-to. It's like, okay, here's where your email address is. Somebody new coming on the board. All right, here's what your email address is going to be. Here's how you access your email. Here's how you access your documents. It's just like the day-to-day stuff you need to know if you haven't been involved in the process. And you get it. You can ask questions, or you can, just get it by osmosis. But it came about because of Brian and Bill and Kevin's emails and complaints about they just don't know how to do things. It's not so much what should you do, what should you do. I mean, it's more like just the day-to-day type of basic stuff of how do you do things. Some of us who have been here a long time know. We know how it works.
So I would also add a chair handbook would be convenient.
Well, okay. Okay. How about a how-to for chair? All right.
And that also, how to for various positions.
Yeah, it might be good to discuss and get the board to talk
Well,
about it.
But
Can I ask a question on this? You talking about doing this on the November 10th board meeting?
Yeah.
I think we have more important things to do. I think it should be drafted first, distributed, and then people get a chance to look at it, and then we can discuss it. But I don't see it as a huge, it's kind of, the horse is out of the barn now. The guys didn't understand how to do that stuff, and we all worked to help them learn how to do it.
so I think Andy's does brings up some interesting points here.
It's
What
important
I'd suggest is,
that
Andy, can you take the lead on drafting a handbook because you got the institutional knowledge? You probably have a lot of the documents. And
Yeah,
then
I mean,
maybe-
I can. It just the board has to discuss it. That's why. I mean, whatever I draft, the board has to discuss.
I
Yeah.
agree with that,
Right.
but I would agree with Ginny that, I mean, particularly we're talking about November and December, where we've only got one meeting to serve double duty each of those months. That's not the time to be putting.
Well, I guess my point is, I would be curious just to see what you come up with, and maybe it takes. I imagine this is a pretty big task, so I'm sure this is even doable to even come up with a complete draft by November. So what I'm proposing is, Andy, take the lead on developing this material, And then when you have something ready to go, then we can bring it up at a future meeting.
Okay, I can do that.
Makes
Okay,
sense.
cool.
Okay, Eric,
Okay, Jenny?
just a couple of quick amendments to the November 10th board meeting.
Okay.
Residents speak out again, 20 instead of 30, and approval of the agenda, 1 minute. Board votes. 5 minutes on CA board vote on the village policy that we had discussed in elections. We discussed it October 27th, so there should be a vote on that. CA votes in the village elections, so 5 minutes
Okay.
is one. I don't know if there's going to be anything in terms of encroachment in the tree policy and any need for any votes, but I guess we can wait and see. And then under board discussion, I have 2 things to add to that.
Okay.
You want me to move on to that?
Sure.
Okay, policy regarding anti-nepotism for part-time workers, 15 minutes. And then the other I could use staff's help on. We do have a subcommittee report on Symphony Woods that we've been waiting for management to give their position on it. So that would be an update on that under board discussion. But also, I thought the board was supposed to receive some briefing on how the settlement and the license worked with Symphony of Lights in terms of was any problems, et cetera, especially regarding land maintenance, et cetera. And am I mistaken? Because we haven't gotten that report or presentation either. So I'd like to have both of those done, and I think it can be done in 20 or maybe 30 minutes. But I think it's important. So
Okay, I'll tentatively put that down for 30 because we have a fair amount of time this meeting.
okay. And then
Where are we with the county, our advocacy around the county's general plan, et cetera? We haven't had any time to hear about where we are around Newtown zoning, a Columbia Visitor Center, all those things that are we going to is the county process going to outpace us here?
I think that's a very good point. And I
Yeah.
think bringing in someone from the county to update the board on where things stand, particularly in light of how soon regulations are going to be drafted and written.
yeah, good point.
And I think those topics would be significant, and it would be really good to hear from the county about
How
that.
much time do you think that would require?
Presentation for sure would be, well, you don't want to ask anybody to do more than a half hour and then answer some questions.
So how about a half an hour?
I think we could do that.
About 45 minutes, because by then the general plan, they should be ready to release the general plan.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the time frame, Shari?
I have to check in with them again about, I don't remember what the actual dates are. Things were sort of pushed back a little bit.
Mhm.
So I'm not exactly sure what the dates are, but I think November would certainly be appropriate to get that information.
So we'll need 45 minutes for this, sounds like.
Yeah, sure.
Well, wouldn't some of the time frames be highlighted under Spotlight on Columbia report?
I don't know that the general plan is linked into that.
Well,
And especially, if you want to invite the county, I mean, because
Oh, no,
no.
where you want to hear from the county.
Yeah.
And you want to get on their calendar early. So
Yeah.
you want to ask them now, can you make the November meeting?
Definitely.
yeah, no, I'm all in favor of that. I'm just saying, in addition, it would be nice if we had just those timelines you're talking about in the Spotlight on Columbia.
Yeah, and I think judging from the areas that have been the hot topics, even if we can't get a full picture, just addressing the types of issues that came up around full spectrum housing and proposals having to do with future development in the county, both in terms of Gateway and in terms of the western part of the county, and the impact on Columbia of accessory dwelling units. I think that is of major, major importance to Columbia villages.
Okay. So,
I
what
had
we-
a few comments, if I could.
Sure.
I think the advocacy is hearing from the county presentation, I think would be great. We had tried that and then they delayed the process, so it was not needed. So I think that is good timing. I just want to say that both the anti-nepotism and the board voting on how CA casts votes in elections that are for the sitting board members, I think is a pretty obvious conflict of interest. It's why I voted no on the discussion. And then on Symphony Woods update, we clearly reported during the last budget process that there is an issue with a non-compliance. And so we have not pursued continuing to look at that until the organization we have an agreement with is in compliance as Inner Arbor Trust. In terms of Symphony Lights and reporting issues, what we had committed to was reporting if there were issues. There were none, so we did not report any. So I was just clarifying some of the discussion that had happened.
I'm a little confused. You said that there's not issues, and then you also said there's non-compliance. Isn't non-compliance an issue?
Okay, so I'll state again. There were two things brought up. Symphony Woods Subcommittee, which was about the agreements with Inner Arbor Trust and the easement agreement. They are out of compliance, as we reported in fiscal year budgeting this past year. We repeatedly recommended against not making the grant agreement because they were out of compliance. The board voted to allocate the grant and not to disperse it until they are in compliance. They're still not in compliance, so we have not pursued, from a staff perspective, revisiting the agreement until the organization is actually in compliance. Separate, there is a settlement and license agreement with completely different organizations, and we did not have any issues with the license agreement. So those are two separate things, but they were discussed like they were a single item. Again, they're two separate items with different organizations involved.
And the latter, Lakey, was about Symphony of Lights or about Symphony Woods outside
Symphony of Lights. And the commitment was that if there were issues, operational issues, we would report those to the board, and there were none, which I did send an email at the close and say that there were no outstanding issues.
And the conflict of interest you referred to, I wasn't clear what you meant by that.
So I would pose that having board members take a vote on how the organization casts votes for the seats those board members occupy is a conflict of interest. That is my opinion.
Isn't that how boards work? I mean, most boards generally choose their own members. I mean, to say it's a little different because we're elected, but
I don't know that I've seen elected board members choose how they get elected. But again, perhaps that's beyond my.
I also don't know too many.
expertise.
I also don't know too many CEOs that get to choose their own board members also. So the CEO is casting CA votes. CEO is effectively choosing their own board members. I'm not sure how often. I mean, CA is a kind of a weird organization.
It is,
So
but
it's
this is
hard to
about a
find.
policy.
And perhaps that's why we did not cast votes. I think that's exactly what I stated. I'm just going on the record that I don't think it's appropriate, but I clearly am in the minority on that.
Got it. Thank you.
So right now we've got, right now we're a little oversubscribed. So if we add 5 minutes for CA votes, 15 minutes for nepotism policy, even if I take the Symphony Woods down to 15 minutes and the Newtown zoning at 45 minutes, I've got 60, 70, I got 80 minutes. So I'm over by about 20 minutes.
Why don't we
And I'm
drop
positive
Symphony of
that
Lights?
we don't need Symphony Woods, Symphony of Lights.
I'll
This
ask
is
Ginny for
November
her
10th.
take on that.
This is November 10th. It might be that they're in compliance by then, but it's just a matter of the audits being completed or something.
Well, I need a couple of words then, though, as a member who wasn't involved then. Is there something that needs to happen that is not currently happening in order for Symphony of Lights to happen this year? Or
No,
is
there's
Symphony of
no
Lights-
issue with Symphony of Lights.
I'm sorry, say again, please.
There is no issue with Symphony of Lights that I'm aware of currently.
So Symphony of Lights is going to happen this year, as far as we know. Obviously, we're
Yes.
not. Okay.
As far as I am aware, yes.
And it's going to be done under an agreement or set of agreements that we were party to and we believe are being.
Yes, that were approved last November. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you.
So, Ginny, does that answer your concern?
Not on the Symphony of Woods subcommittee. I think my understanding is that staff was also going to look at maintenance and whether exactly what would be involved in CA taking that over and telling us what it would cost, whether it was a good idea or not a good idea. And we haven't heard anything on that. And, so I really think we need to look at it, where the staff is on that. I hear the issue of non-compliance, but this is November 10th. It's quite possible they will be compliant.
And if they're not, then the report will be a simple one. They're not in compliance. This is where we are.
But even then, the issue I just mentioned, why would that not be able to be analyzed? And what other issues? So I really think
I'm just posing that from a staffing resource allocation standpoint, it has not been operationally prudent to assign staff to evaluate something that is currently not in compliance.
I don't
Once it comes
understand.
into compliance, it would make sense to evaluate it.
But they still continue to function and they have budget needs too. I guess we can find out when they're going to be in compliance, but our two representatives aren't here tonight. But we haven't heard any big problem.
I think one of them is on, one or both of them might be on the next meeting, the next BOC. So what if we take the Symphony of Woods and move it to the next BOC, say a December meeting when the two IAT members are on the BOC?
Okay, all right.
Okay, so that would be a topic for, Symphony of Woods would be a topic for December or the next BOC.
Yeah, okay.
So I believe that gets us down to,
That's November 28th or something they need.
either November 28th or December 10th, or whatever December date. So that gets us to 45, 60, 65. So we're enough room to fiddle around here.
So the Howard County General Plan, asking somebody from the county, how much time was that allotted?
45.
45.
45 for that. Nepotism 15. CA board votes is 5. So that's 50, 65. So we're over by 8 minutes. But if we move the call to order from 5 to 1, then we're over by 4 minutes. And
Residents speak out from 30.
yeah, you can either do a resident speak out or the questions only could be reduced to 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So so what I propose is move the call to order to 1. CA votes for 5 minutes. Nepotism policy for 15 minutes. Newtown zoning for 45 minutes. And questions only to 15 minutes. And if we need a tree or encroachment policy to vote on, we can always add that for 5 minutes. And that can be added later if needed based on the previous meeting's discussion. So can I get a motion to do all that?
So moved.
Can I make one clarification?
Sure.
If we're to contact the county to make a presentation, I just want to be clear, it would be on the general plan update. It would not be on Newtown zoning because that is not the process they're in, just for a quick clarification.
Okay.
I think it would be the Howard County, the proposed Howard County general plan and effects on Columbia villages or something of that kind.
Yeah,
Okay.
Columbia and its villages. Yeah.
And we're looking at how the new general plan impacts Columbia and CA. Obviously, we're not going to discuss the entire county. Okay. So can I get a motion to do all that?
Yes, so moved.
Okay. Ginny moves. Can I get a second?
Second,
Okay. I'll call the roll. Ginny,
Yes.
Alan,
yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Lakey.
No.
I'm a yes. The motion passes 4-1. That is the last. So now we're on to administrative items. Any administrative items that we need to deal with? Okay, if there's no administrative items, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. So
Second.
moved.
Any seconds?
Second,
Okay, Jenny moves, Alan seconds. Any objections? Motion, meeting's adjourned at whatever time it is.
Good night, everybody.
9:01. Good night.